how'd you guys overcome that imposter syndrome in the very beginning of being like, hey, I only own one property, but I'm gonna have a podcast about, financial freedom and real estate and, entrepreneurship?
Let me say one thing about imposter syndrome. It never goes away. Okay. And the reason why it doesn't go away is it may go away in some facet of your life, but then you get in a room with somebody who's doing 10x you, and then you have it all over again. So stop running from the imposter syndrome. Lean into it. Lean into the fact that, like, I might be scared to start this thing. It might not work out, but you can always pivot along the way. You're going to have imposter syndrome at every single roadblock or every single fork in the road about the new thing that you're doing. And that is something that it's funny because Ryan and I are starting a coaching program right now. And we just had a conversation before we went on with you about, like, how the actual outcome is going to be for people that are coming into this. And we're formulating it. It's by this time this podcast is out, it's probably going to be launched. But the point is that even all the things that we've done, people from the outside looking in are like, they think it's all roses and it's all great. And it's like, we still have imposter syndrome, like we still have that about the new thing that we're doing. And I don't think people should run away from it. I think you should lean in. And that's kind of like my take on it.
Yeah, I agree. There's a quote I really like, and it's very basic, but someone told me it a long time ago. They say, life truly begins once you step outside your comfort zone. And I didn't understand what that meant until I actually did it. I used to be super self-conscious and shy, growing up before I got into high school and things like that. And I don't know what it was. For whatever reason, I just would kind of like curl up when I would get into certain situations. But once you start putting yourself into situations you're not comfortable with, your skin gets thicker and you build that force field in the callus, the muscle, over time. And I think even for us, I used to get in standing up in front of people, start sweating and nervous that what are they thinking about me? Am I going to stutter, going to say something dumb? And then you get on these podcasts, you're like, okay, I'm talking to a millionaire, a CEO of a company. How are they going to receive me? Am I going to ask the right questions? You're always thinking about what you're doing and how it's going to be reflected. But as you go through things, you stop focusing on that, and it takes practice and takes time and takes stepping out of that comfort zone for you to even get comfortable. So what I mean by this is if we just kept our story in the whole time and never did anything about it, we'd be in the same exact spot, maybe a little bit closer to our goal, but really putting your aspirations out into the universe and taking a leap and asking questions and understanding there's no dumb questions and being able to source the end destination where you want to go and try to find roads to get there. I think that's really what allowed us to get there. It sounds so basic, right? And you're just like, oh, well, what do you mean you just ask questions? No, well, I decided to tell exactly where I was on my journey and ask for help and say, hey, what would you do from here? If you could go back to your 18-year-old self or someone just starting out on their journey, what would you do? We just ask that question to ask it. It's like, okay, cool. Now I'm going to go do that. I'm going to take what you said and make the next step. And so we just kept asking the right questions over time. And I basically putting a bow on this thing is try something that makes you feel super uncomfortable. And once that thing is done, you get this rush of feeling like you're alive. And that can go from anything to talking in front of people that you've never done before, or, think about something as I don't know if you've ever done cliff jumping or jumped off a small bridge into I'm saying this sounds probably dumb. Hey, jump off a bridge, but
bungee
something that makes you skydiving or something that makes you fearful. And you're like, oh my God, I don't want to do this. I don't know this. You do it when you're done. You're like, holy crap, I want to do that again. You get that flooding feeling. And that's what we got after some of these episodes. We'd get people that we've read books about complimenting us on how we navigate conversations, how we ask questions. And you get so juiced up and you're like, dude, we can do this. We're good at this. And so I think it comes down to putting yourself out there, and then you'll be surprised. It takes one person to believe in you to get that confidence to say, hey, let's keep going and keep going and keep going. And I think that's what carried us through the last 4 years is we had some people really looked at to us that are way levels above us and dude, you guys got to keep going. And it kind of gets you through some of the dark days. And I know there's a lot of thoughts there, but I do firmly believe that you need to take a little bit of a leap of faith in life. Mm-hmm. If you just keep doing what you're doing, nothing's going to change.
So good. There's something we can go for an hour about fear in your comfort zone. One of my favorite quotes is just expand your comfort zone. So yeah, you can maybe hop out, but then don't hop back in. Go hop out, and then boom, now your radius is bigger. Now you can do more. Now you're not as scared. I think especially with I was in sales with cold calling. I used to be so scared to pick up the phone. I used to have to run around, jack myself up. All right, pick up the phone. And so then it just became a habit. And then I just naturally got better and better when I just did repetition and just slowly just expanding that comfort zone. So I love that you touched on that. Another thing you touched on was it's not all roses. And I think it's super cool that you guys document the journey, because that's a way to be transparent. Like, no, we're not this multi-millionaire yet. You guys get to watch us stumble, fail. You get to hear about some of these stories. So obviously I want to have you guys share some of your wins. But let's start with the loss. Like you said, something burned down. Like, you want to walk me through what happened there?
Yeah, that was a big loss. I think it ended up being a win because of the insurance that we had on the property. But Rye and I, back in February 23, we had a property in South Jersey that we got a call from the tenant, and we don't get calls from the tenant because we have a property management company. So, and it was like 11 at night, and I was just about to go to sleep, and I didn't answer because I was about to, like, the communication typically goes through the property manager. And then we listened to the voicemail in the morning, and we found out, there was a fire at the property. And all the rush of the feeling of like, holy shit, man, the worst possible thing that could happen happened here. Like they say, like, oh, I'm not going to buy properties. Those things can get destroyed. They can get burnt. Like, it literally got destroyed. And so it was like full, complete loss. And, we had to battle with insurance, and our property manager had to go out there, and like all of the steps. And thank God we had the resources. One of the first people we had on the podcast was Chad Carson. And that's our guy. Shout out to Chad. He has actually, like, because we networked with him, he had a guide of like what to do. So we followed his guide, and we checked with the insurance company. We were waiting for the checks and this, that, the third. And it turns out it worked out for us, because we ended up selling the property and getting and recouping all of our cash and more. But those fears that set in, like the worst possible situation. I mean, when I first bought my first duplex, within 3 weeks there was a rainstorm, and the storm like smashed through the windows. Basically, I don't know if it was lightning or whatever, but it was like raining inside my property. And I'm getting texts and calls, and I'm walking outside of my house. I'm calling like my only friend who's an investor. It's like all of these moments, all these fears, all these things that happen, you end up getting better at solving the problems. And then you'll end up dealing with bigger problems, right? But you're more equipped to deal with the smaller ones. And right now, entrepreneurship for people, it's just how much can you endure? How many problems can you solve? How quickly can you solve them and move on to the next one? That's really what it comes down to. So for us, those are some of the losses, and we've just kind of just taken the hits. And I'm not saying all the days have been pretty, because they haven't, but what do? You give up? Like, that's the last thing that you're going to do.
Yeah.
So.
Dude, it's funny because entrepreneurship and success in keep both of those topics or thoughts in mind. Like, I'm trying to show you like a picture of whiteboard in your head, and the trajectory of both of those is not linear. There's so many scribbles and swigs, up, down, left, right, back, and down, till you finally get to that pinnacle. And then once you get there, it's really like the next mountain peak is set in the distance, right? There's never an end to success, just your story and all of that. But someone told us a quote the other day, and I really liked it. It's like, if you don't win, you learn. So there's no such thing as failure, right? And it brings me back to the moments and the time that this property, for example, if we're going to go with this example, that it basically burned to the ground. There's a moment of panic in our heads. We're like, okay, what are we going to do? Instead of panicking, freaking each other out, it's like, okay, let's just figure out logically the steps. Like, what would you do here? You have to take care of the tenants, you have to take care of the property, and just go down a checklist, right? Luckily, to Cory, what he mentioned was Chad had a guide and a podcast, a full episode on his house burned down and what he did. We listened to the podcast on the way to driving to the property to see what it looked like, followed the checklist, called insurance, did it, mapped it out, and we ended up fine. Like, it took a long time and it was annoying, but the tenants were okay. We ended up being okay. The property is now with another investor that put a fourplex up instead of a duplex. Like, everyone's okay. Everyone actually won in the scenario. But I say this too, when you get into entrepreneurship, there are going to be so many failures that you just need to embrace it and know that day one. And for us, I think about all the time. I wouldn't change what happened, because all these things are just making us stronger every single day. It sucks. It's a pain in the ass when they happen. But the days where we just have the easy wins, you're like, dude, these are payments for all the failures that I had. I don't think about anything as an easy win these days. We're like, you get wired, sell a house, or you get wired something. You're like, well, 17 million things went wrong with that property before I got rid of it anyway. So we had to sell another Airbnb that wasn't generating money, and we dumped a bunch of cash into it thinking it was going to be great. We underwrote the property wrong. Like, there's just things that happen over time, and it's going to happen as an investor. But we've had a lot more wins than losses because we learned to pivot. At some point, you need to know when to give up on something. And I don't mean give up, but like relinquish yourself of the bleeding, right? And then pivot and move on. And I think having a partner has helped at least me a lot. And I should say the same for Cory. Going at this alone, there's a lot of failure, and you can kind of drive yourself crazy, like a hamster on the wheel. You're like, oh my God, like how many different scenarios could possibly happen? And then only one thing actually does happen out of all the scenarios you created in your head. So having an accountability partner to get you through it, through the good and bad, as long as you're both not having a bad day, you're good. You have, and knowing that if the other one's miserable, all right, you got to flip the switch, dude, and get him out of it, because both of you will just dive down the hellhole if not. So, that was a lot there, but I'll say, like, getting through the pain, just know that there's going to be pain, but if you can find an accountability partner, someone that will uplift you through those moments, or a community like we all have, and like other people that have been through this, you'll be fine. You will totally be fine, but it is not for the faint of heart to get in this game. And I think if you know that early on and you buck up, it's going to change your life completely.